days a week. It is a blast to meet people for virtual coffees or co-working and all that fun stuff. Top Fitness is up and running. We have a daily workout called a dues paid workout, or a DPW. We also started what is called a Jump Start challenge. So you're going to be getting an email every day with the workout of the day from Top Fitness. And we announced today with a video from Jesse Itzler that we are doing a collaboration with Jesse and his Running Man Festival, which I couldn't even tell you how excited I am about that. Tomorrow we have our Top Talk. On the 9th, we have a meetup in Atlanta. On the 10th, we have a Culture City Gala with Dominique Wilkins. On the 13th, Top Advisor Office Hours with Anna Morgan. 16th, Top Advisor Office Hours with two Olympians, Joe Jacoby and Inga. The 21st, we have our first Legend series with Layla Ali. And in February, Peter Shaler is hosting us in Nicaragua for our humanity expedition, which I could not be more excited about. I'm bringing my son. I'm fired up. And if you want in on that, I think we have 10 spots left. Of everything I've ever done in my life, one of the top 5 most impactful things I've ever done in my life was last year's humanity expedition to Nicaragua. For anybody who's new, Dr. Anne Marine, I'm talking to you. Hello. Good to see you. Our format is this. I'm going to do like a fireside chat with Shola for about 30 minutes. Then we're going to open it up to live Q&A. So if you have a question, just put in the chat, hey, I've got a question. Kathy will let me know, and I'll tee you up, and you can ask your question directly to the man, the myth, the legend, Shola Richards. So Shola is also known as Brother Teresa, which has got to be like the coolest nickname of all time. He's the author of this book, Civil Unity. Mel Robbins said, well, she said a bunch of stuff, but she said, you need to read this book. He also wrote Go Together and Making Work Work. He has reached readers in 160 countries. Today Show, CBS This Morning, Forbes. He's the CEO of Go Together Global. He's an award-winning keynote speaker and just an absolute cool human being. So we are about to get into it with Shola Richards, but Kathy, for the first time ever on this new platform, get us started. Thank you to Mike Perlow for the great intro. Shola, what do you think?
All right, a few things. First of all, holy crap. I'm sitting here watching this. I'm like, I don't know if I should like rip my shirt off, start flipping tables over here, or like just sit back and take in the energy. This is quite a welcome. And for all of you that came, transition to the new platform to be here for this, that's super cool. Thank you for your tech savviness and your willingness to chat with me today. Much appreciated. And Scott, that was a hell of a welcome.
I love it. It's all downhill from here. You know, the rest of the year, all these keynote speeches, you're going to be like, where's the cool intro?
That I was already prepared for that. So, I mean, what a perfect way to start the year at the very top and just slide down to the abyss from here. We'll make it try to find something positive about that.
Happy New Year, my friend, and thank you for joining us. I'm ready to dive in. Are you?
Brother, as they say, if you stay ready, then you don't have to get ready.
So, my first question is this. This is a la Snoop Dogg. You dedicated your book to yourself, like Snoop.
I did.
No offense to your lovely wife Amber, or your girls, or even Ace, but you dedicated the book to yourself. Tell us more.
Yeah, we'll do. So my very first book, I dedicated to my lovely wife and to my daughters. My second book, I gave to my parents. The third one's for me. And so I wrote the book and to be clear, I dedicated to my younger self, the kid who was super broken, scared, didn't have any idea how to navigate this incredibly challenging, toxic world that we're in. I literally wrote the book that I wish that my younger self would have had the opportunity to read, because if he had the opportunity to read this book, it literally would have changed his life. And my life has been one that's been a little challenging. I'm sure we'll get into that. But the good news is having an understanding of civility, the way that I look at it, is a way to reframe how we look at the world and how we can treat each other. And I believe that we're defined by how we treat each other. And I wanted to give that gift to my younger self.
We're entering such an interesting time in our history with a new president coming in, or an old new president coming in, and likely a lot of negative rhetoric. And I think we all agree civility needs to be front and center. So I think your book is incredible and very, very timely. Tell us a little bit about, so you had the honor of going to Capitol Hill and testifying to the House of Representatives. What did you tell them?
First of all, clearly I did an amazing job, because they're so listening to everything I said about civility. So I just crushed it.
Difference.
I know, right? Nothing like starting a call off on a huge failure. The funny thing is, that was wild. So September 23rd, 2021, if memory serves. And I was asked to come in and testify for 2 hours in front of the House of Representatives, to be specific, the Select Committee for the Modernization of Congress. Now, this is now defunct, unfortunately. When the new Congress came in, they got rid of this committee very quickly. But the idea of this committee was they were like, dude, our body is a raging dumpster fire. We get nothing done. All we do is grandstand, and we got to figure out how we can operate. So they brought 3 people in. They brought in a leadership expert, a teamwork expert, and a civility expert, presumably was me. And the 3 of us sat there taking questions from this bipartisan committee, which was 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans. At the time, the Democrats were in charge of Congress, House of Representatives. So they could have made it 7 and 6, but in a good faith effort, they made it completely even. So totally bipartisan. And I want to tell you, from a hope perspective, those 12 lawmakers on either side of the aisle, didn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat, they saw the dysfunction within Congress, and they were so dedicated to do something about it. And I loved the fact I walked out of there with so much hope. Really quickly on this, Scott, a couple of things that came from this really funny. We offered suggestions on how we can get Congress working, and one of which was like, hey, y'all need to stop televising your committee hearings. Because if you know what they do, they use this for grandstanding. They try to get that 10-second soundbite that they play on social media. So we asked them to stop doing that. And we actually asked them to bring school-age kids from the DC area into their committee hearings. And of course, as a way to kind of get them to behave differently. There's so many different suggestions, but the good news is many of them were actually taken up at the time. But unfortunately, when the new Congress came in, they kind of got rid of those ideas. So there's work to be done, but I want to leave one last thing of hope. Don't let the loud voices that you see on cable news make you think like that's what's the real of Congress is. There's so many lawmakers on both sides of the aisle that want to care for their constituents. unfortunately, the loudest voices are the ones that are heard the most. And I just don't want you to think that that's common in Congress. There's more good people than not.
Shola, I guess, it's probably a softball question, but why does civility matter?
If that was, gosh, I wish that's a pretty hard softball question. I'll tell you, well, first of all, let me define what I think civility is. Civility, in my opinion, is the active demonstration of respect and the ability to disagree without disrespect. Both of these things are very hard to do. Why it's critical is there's literally nothing good in our world that can survive without civility. You want to be able to navigate differences of opinion with your family, your colleagues, in your community. You want our politics to be toxicity free. You want to go to schools where your children can learn in a loving, respectful environment, respectful of other people's differences. Civility has to be the foundation. If we don't have that, then all the things that are good will fall to the wayside. So it's a challenge that I'm placing in front of everyone, and you don't have to be perfect at this. This is really, really hard stuff. If it was easy, we'd be doing it already. The problem is we're not. So I wrote Civil Unity to create the literal most practical guide on civility ever written. Yeah, I'm calling my shot. Literally the most practical guide. So my background's in organizational psychology and learning and development. So like, how can I find a way to remove all the excuses? Like, oh, I don't know, how do I deal with someone who has a different ideological opinion from me? Or how do I deal with someone who's deeply harmed me? Or how do I deal with people who are anti-Semitic or racist or Islamophobic or homophobic? How do I deal with that? I want to remove all of those barriers so you literally have the guide to walk you through the most challenging situations that life has to offer.
It is so hard. I am by nature, I think I'm a right fighter. And we have that fight or flight response. I think I lost the flight gene and I'm naturally inclined to fight. I'm working on it very hard, but even as, Brother Teresa, don't you get pissed?
Oh my God, all the time.
How do you keep it in check?
Oh, there's so many things. So there's a couple of things that I think are, if I want to get really super practical about this, because I get angry all the time. People are like, oh, you're Brother Teresa. I was like, yeah, well, I mean, Gandhi got pissed. People they get in fights. Obviously it's like how we manage our emotions is such a big part of this. So in the book, I give some practical tips on how to really manage your anger when you do get frustrated. One thing that you should do, and everyone should do this from a practical perspective, you should know what your triggers are, your emotional triggers. These are the things that get you really upset. So for me, just off the top of my head, a couple of triggers that really get me really upset are when people deny the existence of intolerance, like racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, et cetera, et cetera, when they deny that. Another thing which may sound a little strange, it's not strange at all, is I am a huge animal lover. So when I see people who abuse animals, and even stupid stuff like leaving a dog in a car on a hot summer day, like I swear I want to fly into a blind rage. So there's so many other things like bad listeners and people who take advantage or make fun of people that are struggling with disabilities, like things like that just drive me insane. So I know that. So when I encounter it, I'm able to use what I use as my way of kind of my calming breath. I do a lot of breath work. There's something that's very common called box breathing. I'm sure you all have heard of it before. Box breathing is like life-changing. And it's so critical in the moment that if something is happening, and by the way, if you're not familiar, box breathing is very simple. It's like 4, 4, 4, and 4. And these are second intervals. So for 4 seconds, you inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold it for 4 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale for 4 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then hold again for 4 seconds. And you do this in a loop. What this does is that your sympathetic nervous system, that's all like, that fight or flight thing that you're just talking about, Scott, you interrupt it because it's like, well, wait a second. There's no way this dude would be breathing like this if I was under a real threat. I guess I can calm down now. And it's a powerful way to interrupt. Also, another thing is having a mantra. My mantra is calm is strong. I say it to myself all the time. So when someone's freaking me out, like, dude, calm is strong. I'm not going to let this guy. I'm not going to take their bait. But we have to do this intentionally, because a lot of people just kind of let themselves run with their emotions instead of being thoughtful about it. Unfortunately, that's how we get in this mess. So we have to outthink the most basic impulses that we all have, so we can outsmart them and be ready to deal with the anger that is going to come, because it's a normal part of the human existence.
Yep. What you talk about this in the book, the number one myth of civility.
Yeah. The number one myth of civility, which is so frustrating, is that civility just means, this is the number one myth, I don't believe this, obviously. Civility means just turning the other cheek, and just like, if someone's abusing you, just this hug them in a warm embrace and it's going to be fine. Screw that, man. Like, that's insanity. So if someone's harming someone else, the idea that we're not going to just stand up and fight for what we believe in, and we can fight, but it's how we fight that's the issue. Here's the thing. A lot of people have this idea, and I want to hopefully dispel this myth on this call. There's a huge difference between being nice and being kind. Mm-hmm. Nice, by definition, means being polite and agreeable. And I hope we can agree within the community here that that's a super low bar. The worst human being is capable of a please or a thank you, right? Kindness is demonstrating through your actions that you genuinely care about another human being. And it's so much harder. So nice people avoid conflict. They avoid difficult conversations. They don't stand up when they see someone being bullied or harassed. They're like, oh, my name is Wes. Keep me out of this mess. Kind people have the really difficult conversations. And I'll give you an example. Have any of you on this call ever had the situation where, like, you held the door open for someone and the person walked through the door and they didn't even acknowledge the fact that you held the door for them? That's like super annoying, right? You're like, you're welcome.
Yeah, where's my courtesy wave?
Well, the reality is, like, if we're more angry about that, then we're more interested in being nice than being kind. And that's so much harder to hear. Nice is the most, let's just put it this way. Nice is something that you do. Kind is something that you are. Mm-hmm. Civility requires kindness. And if we're going to be real, niceness is like the breeding ground for passive aggressiveness, right? Like, oh my gosh, Kathy, we all love Kathy. Great job organizing this meeting. It was so much better than the one you did last month. I'm so glad that you're finally improving, Kathy. Bless your heart. Like, that's awful. What is that? Well, first of all, everyone loves KL because she's fabulous. But, like, that's the definition of passive aggressiveness. Civility can't have that, right, in its place. We got to talk about kindness, doing the hard stuff, standing up against bullies, and doing it in a way that's respectful, and not just basically attacking people, because science has shown that never works. And I'm happy to get into that too if you want.
Yeah. I think it's a foregone conclusion that our political system is just off the rails, and civility is, so far from what it is. But we have major problems in the workforce too, but I don't think it's as visible as what we see in politics. What are some of the issues that you see companies facing, and what are the practical steps that they need to take to infuse civility into the workplace?
Well, a couple of things. I'll say that it's just as bad as the political arena as the workplace in many cases. I mean, science has shown that our boss has more impact over our overall health than our primary physician does. So we're in a position where if you're in a toxic environment, all the stuff that you're seeing politically with the intolerance and the rudeness and the grandstanding and the harmful behavior, that's happening in the workplace too. You see bullies that are literally reducing the lifespan of their employees with toxic policies and behaviors. I used to work for a narcissistic boss, and I don't use that term euphemistically, like a literal narcissist that was awful to deal with. So one of the things that we have to do is that we have to be, first of all, we have to be very clear about what we agree is intolerable behavior. right? Bullying is something that I talked a great deal about in my very first book, Making Work Work, the orange one over there in the corner, where if I can get a little vulnerable here, I was in an extremely toxic work environment about 20 years ago. And not to bore you all with the details, but it got really, really bad. So bad that I ended up falling to a very, very deep depression. And I'm not using that term euphemistically, like I was sad. I wasn't sad. I was clinically depressed. And one morning while driving to this incredibly toxic job, I'm like, man, I'm done. And top fam, and I'm not just saying this, I, it was such a dark time. And I was saying to myself, I can't deal with another moment like this. And I made a decision while driving to this toxic job that I was going to take my own life. And I'm not just saying that euphemistically. I literally attempted. So I'm coming to you this call as a suicide survivor. And to be specific, because I think it's important, I live in Los Angeles, and while driving down the 405 freeway here in LA, I attempted to drive my car up the overpass in an attempt to make it look like an accident. Reasons for that I'm not clear on. Super grateful for the guardrail held. Sorry, I get emotional talking about this because it's like, there's a book called Your Body Keeps the Score. So like whenever I talk about this, it just comes back. But I'm still here, right? And so to go back to your question, Scott, and I want to give that context, I think it's important. There are a lot of people like me. I'm what's called an HSP, a highly sensitive person. I feel things really deeply. So I often blame myself for what was happening to me in the workplace. And I think one of the first steps is to realize that there's really behavior that no one should have to endure. No one should have to be humiliated, disrespected, intentionally excluded, whatever it may be, made the butt of racist jokes or what have you. Like these things shouldn't be a part of any civil workplace. And so that's a start, just that idea of understanding, but then it's also being willing to document bad behavior, report them as necessary, and go through the steps. And there's so many of them that I want to bore you with them. It's all in the book. But I'll tell you one thing that I think the step that most people forget or skip is the idea that it's not you, it's them. And it's important to know that. So when we're dealing with toxic behavior, we don't always put the onus on us, like we need to change. Part of us do, but toxic behaviors and environments need to change first.
Yeah. People ask me about this community all the time, and they oftentimes they say it's a group of like-minded people. And I'm like, not really. It's the Outlier Project. It's super eclectic. And I wouldn't say we're like-minded. I would say we're like-hearted. And because of that, I think we're pretty good at effectively disagreeing, but still supporting each other. What are some of the things that people need to do to disagree effectively?
Yeah. So again, I'm a big fan of practicality. So I'll lean into a little bit of science on this. There's two things, if you'll humor me. So one is why it doesn't make any sense to attack people for their beliefs. And there's science behind this. There's something called the boomerang effect. This was like first proposed as the reactance theory. And sorry, I'm a little bit of a nerd, so forgive me. In 1966 by this guy named Jack Brem. So he was doing research on this and found out that when you attack someone for their beliefs, what it does intrinsically is it makes us feel like our autonomy is being taken away from us. We're trying to force someone to think something that they don't want to think. So what it does is it ends up causing them to double down on what they believe. So if you see someone who voted differently than you in the election, like why would you vote for this person? Are you crazy? What's wrong with you? It's not like the person's going to be like, or I'll give you even a better example. Forget the election because that's past. Let's just use something that's still ongoing, right? There's like gun reform, right? Or so people, I'm no problem sharing with you my beliefs. I I'm a lover, not a fighter. I don't own guns. I do not fault anyone who does. I'm just not a gun guy. This is not my thing, right? So if I saw someone who had a gun, and I'm like, you own a gun? Oh my God, you are such an idiot. You're such an idiot. Look at you owning a gun. Is that some weird way for you to overcompensate for your inability to please your wife? Is that why you have a gun? Like, okay, now, do you honestly think that person would be like, wow, Shola, thank you for your astute commentary. You know, you're right. I use my gun as a way to self-soothe for my numerous bedroom failures. Thank you so much for taking the time to show me the light. I appreciate your candor. Like, come on, man. That's not going to happen, right? So what will happen instead is they're going to say, screw you, and we go to our separate corners, never to be seen again. So what people tell me is, well, Shola, then what am I supposed to do? If I see trash juice humans doing trash juice things, shouldn't I call them out on it? Well, here's the thing. I'm going to tell you this from a purely scientific point of view. The boomerang effect clearly states when you do something that's going to force someone into a corner, they're going to come back fighting all the time. So if you want to attack someone, just do it knowing three things will happen. One, you're going to deepen their belief in something that you find problematic. Two, maybe most importantly, they're not going to see the benefit of your position. Why would they, right? That's now gone. And three, the world is now an actively worse place because you're contributing to the discourse that we all hate. So what I'm going to challenge people to do instead, which is very hard to do, I think, is to find common ground. And I'm going to tell you a very practical way to do this. Let's say you're having an argument with someone about something that's polarizing. And there's so many things out there. It could be transgender athletes in sports. It could be the conflict in the Middle East. It could be abortion. It could be politics. Name whatever polarizing topic you want to talk about. And once someone broaches the topic, just say this. This is called setting the ground rules. It's very powerful. Hey, before we go any further, I have a feeling that this conversation could go off the rails pretty quickly. Are you willing to stay respectful, even if my opinion is different from yours? That's all you got to say. Now, one or two things will happen, right? One, they'll be like, screw you. If you believe in blah, 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 then we're not fam. And then, okay, then you do not engage. However, if they're willing to take the bait and like, sure, I'll be respectful, then you engage in the conversation. And more people, science has shown this, are more willing to stay respectful if you set the ground rule beginning the conversation instead of in the middle or the end. I go on forever about this because there's so much science around this. And again, I'm a little bit of a nerd. But I just feel like that's one way to get us to start disagreeing more effectively. And I have a lot of these exercises in the books of ways to pull out whether you're dealing with someone who said something horribly racist, homophobic, sexist to you. Got techniques for that. I'm willing to dive into anything you want. It's like my favorite thing to talk about.
It's interesting. So I don't know if everyone had an opportunity to get their copy of Outlier magazine in the interview I did with Jesse Itzler, but you know, Jesse's a pretty accomplished guy. And I said one of the things that I admire most about you, Jesse, is I know your friend group pretty well. And your friend group is the most eclectic friend group. And it's a group of people that I know have polar opposite views when it comes to a lot of things. But Jesse has this rare ability to accept people for who they are, even though I know that there are people he's super close with that I know he doesn't agree with certain things that they believe in. And he said to me, of all the things that we talked about, he said that's one of the biggest compliments someone's ever given him. And I said, but how do you do it? Like, how do you do it? And he's like, I don't know. I just grew up watching my parents, you know, take people in, complete strangers, and feed them and have them around our house. And he grew up in all that diversity, but, you know, he just has this incredibly effective way of being non-judgmental. And I think so. I don't know if that's one of the things that's helpful for me is, you know, looking at people like yourself or like Jesse, who I can mirror, what are your thoughts on, finding those people and really trying to mirror what you see?
I agree with what Jesse said and what you just said too, Scott. I mean, I have friends who have different viewpoints on me on a lot of stuff. I think that it's important though to frame it a little bit. So it's like, if you're actively harming or hurting other people with your behavior, then I feel like that's kind of a red line, So it's like, I'll give you an example. Like, I think most reasonable, again, keyword reasonable, most reasonable people believe that like we all deserve to live in peace. Like, we all deserve to live our best lives. We all want safety for our family, and we all deserve to have our humanity seen and respected. Like, I feel like those things should all be something that we all collectively agree upon. So if someone's like, no, I don't think this person's humanity should be seen or respected, then that's a totally different conversation. But if you have different political views or whatever, because the idea is like the need to have to agree on everything before we engage in civil conversation is an exercise in immaturity and futility. Like, we got to grow up. Like, we're gonna share the world with people who don't do it the way that we do. Like, that's a fact. There's no way we can get around it, right? So knowing that is critical. I will say this though. There's a saying that I shared in the book when you're talking about like deeply hateful people and like sharing space with these folks. If someone's like, hey, do you spend a lot of time trying to convince like racists and homophobes and anti-Semites and Islamophobes to like change? And I'm like, no, I really don't. There's an old saying that, or at least my favorite saying, is that honeybees do not waste a moment of their time trying to convince houseflies that honey tastes better than shit. And you gotta sit with that for a minute. You gotta let that marinate for a hot minute, because it's like, if you're into like the shittiness of intolerance and instead of the sweet honey of civility and kindness, like how, I don't know, like I'm like, hey, you want to hang out that stinky pile in the grass? I mean, you can. I mean, if that is what floats your boat, but there's such a better way over here, right? So I feel like percentage wise, maybe there's like 15% on either polar opposites, like the houseflies and the honeybees who are all about, but then there's this really big middle of 70% of folks who could go either way. And I think by our civility and our kindness and our respect, we can pull them towards the right side. So those are the ones I'm focusing on influencing the most with my behavior.
I love it. There's so much in the book that we can't possibly cover in 30
There's
minutes.
a lot.
A lot more is going to come out. So Shola, we have a whole bunch of people that would love to ask you questions. You ready for some rapid fire questions coming your way?
Let's do it, man. I'm here for it. Let's go.
We are going to California first. Kimberly Arnold, you are up with Shola.
Wow, amazing. Okay, well, Shola, I'm just a little north of you.
Where?
I'm in San Rafael.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We could just cruise down the 5 or something.
Right on.
Meet up. I loved that when you were talking about how to recognize your trigger and make an adjustment. I love that you went to a body-based practice first. That's my jam. That's what I teach people. And I'm curious, beyond the box breathing, if you have a daily practice that you lean into, because what I also talk to people about, which I know you get, is we become what we practice. So I'm curious if you have a daily practice that you lean into. Yeah.
There's a couple, and it's funny, Kimberly, that you talk about body-based stuff, because that's my jam. I feel like that's one of the best ways to kind of shift our state. Sometimes we just get stuck in our head too often. So already mentioned the box breathing, so I'll move past that one. So I'm a meditator, and I know meditating can be very polarizing. Like, oh, I can't meditate. I can't say this enough. Like, meditation is something that every adult should be practicing. Like, I can't stop thinking about stuff. That's the whole point. So when you think about meditation, right? I don't know. I'm a gym guy. I go to the gym very often, right? And I try to like work out, and that's another thing. But when you think about working out, meditation is the same way. So when you're trying to focusing on your breath, and your mind goes elsewhere, and then you pull it back to your breath, that's a rep. Just like when you're in the gym, right? The more reps you do, the stronger you get. Instead of it being seen as a failure, oh, I lost focus, I can't do this. That's part of the jam. You do a rep and you bring it back. And the more reps you do, the stronger you get. So Kimberly, to answer your question, meditation's huge. That's a big one for me because that allows me to respond to the world instead of react to the world, you know? So like I can be, used to be very reactive, and I deal with a lot of toxicity in my life around, you know, live in LA. So a lot of entitled folks rolling around here. And so I have to be responsive, not reactive. Meditation is a big part of it. Journaling, which I just got into just a little while ago, is another practice that allows me to get what's in my head out of my head. That's a big one. And I definitely recommend doing that as well. But in the moment, I find the box breathing thing to be something that's so critical. And if you don't have the time to do the box breathing, just what they call belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, where you're breathing to the point where your belly is expanding, your diaphragm is expanding. Sorry, I'm getting a little into the science and nerdy stuff about this. That's how, instead of the shallow breathing, you're sitting here listening to me talk, and I'm almost guaranteeing like 99% of you are shallow breathing. If you breathe and you make sure your belly extends as you breathe, it sends a signal to your body that like, it's okay to calm down. We're in a good place. We're safe here. And that's important. So those are my daily practices, Kimberly. There's probably an exercise, move my body. You don't have to do something crazy, but like walk. I literally got myself as a birthday gift. Birthday was in November. Late Christmas gift is a walking a desk treadmill that's arriving tomorrow. So I'm going to use that when I'm doing my calls. So those are the things that I think help me the most. If I didn't do those things, I don't think I can navigate this world that we're in. Oh, and therapy. That's another thing.
Okay, well, thank you for that awesome list. And then I'm going to ask one quick bonus question.
Anything.
If there is one song that got you up dancing in an instant, what song would you say?
That's outrageous. That's like choosing between my kids. Like I don't even know how to. Oh God, you know. Oh gosh. All right, just because it's on the top of my mind. Top. Sorry, I did there. I would probably go with this is on my heart right now, is Lovely Day by Bill Withers. There's something about that energy that just like, I don't know, man, God rest his soul. But like, that's just, it hits me right in the solar plexus. I'm like, oh, lovely day. Let's go. A lovely day. All right. I can't sing. I can't try to start. That's wild.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome.
Awesome.
And for everyone should have their Amanda Sellers Outlier meditation. So Amanda Sellers is one of the best voice actresses in the world, award-winning. She's also a part of our community, and she did a 10-minute Outlier meditation that you guys should all have. If you don't, let Kathy know, and we'll make sure we get it to you. We are
Wait,
going
Scott, before you go to the question, can I just throw one thing in there for everyone who's thinking about questions? I want us, because in our time together, I want to make sure this is well used. Please. There's no question that's off limits. So if you're thinking, should I ask him? Oh no, this is too personal. I already talked about suicide. I've already talked about other stuff. I have mental health challenges. I'm open to talk about anything on this call. Nothing's off limits. So I just want to throw that out there. Okay. Back to you, Scott.
Love it. Yarrow in Florida, you're up.
Thank you, Scott. Hello, Shola, in person.
Hey, yeah, Yarrow. So nice to meet you.
You too. I'm just so grateful and joyful that you're on my radar now. So thanks for engaging online yesterday, and thanks for being here today. And
thank you for having me.
Your story and your impact. So I so appreciate your vulnerability and honesty and just putting your story out there, because I think that level of candidness really drives home the message. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask maybe a more surface level question, but I am trying to segue from a past 15 years in education to more workforce development and individual motivated participation in your professional space realm. And the culture is such a huge piece of that. I feel like, why people are burnt out and disengaged in the workplace is chronic, and your work fits right into that piece, I feel like. But my question is, do you see in the work that you do in organizational spaces, do you see it as a top-down solution or a bottom-up solution, or is it really just a human issue and solution that everybody at every stage needs to engage in the solution in order for it to be sustainable?
Okay, so I hate to answer a question with it depends, because if you're dealing with an incredibly toxic leader, then it's definitely a top-down solution. But generally speaking, from the work that I do, I would say that this is a very much all hands on deck type of situation. There's an idea around accountability that the best organizations that I've worked with, they go farther than boss holds staff accountable or peers hold peers accountable. It's this universal accountability to civility and kindness and respect that I can go to the boss and say, hey, listen, you know, the way that you're speaking during our team meeting just wasn't okay. I just want you to be aware of that if you weren't aware of it. And like, oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that with me. That's the power of bringing this all together. But culture, if you want to define it super simply, it's just like the way we do things around here. And I think this has to be an all hands on deck thing. However, if you forced my hand and said, well, who's going to be? Is it going to be individual, boss, the team? I would probably say the leader if I was forced to, because I'll give you an example. You know, I don't know how many of you in your current jobs, or if you run a business, or if you had jobs in the past like this, where boundaries are non-existent, right? And I think this is a big part of it. As adults, we should have boundaries. And I found that some bosses are quick to violate boundaries, and cultures that let this happen, where people are emailing folks on vacation, on their honeymoon at like 2 a.m. on a Sunday and expecting immediate response. Like, that's insanity. And I'm going to say this with love to everyone who's hearing me. The only people who will be upset with you enforcing your boundaries are the people who benefited from you not having any boundaries in the first place. Does that make sense?
100%.
Okay. And I'll say something else to go even deeper on this, because this is kind of my passion point. You know, for the people who do think it's cool to work on your vacations, I know there's a lot of high achievers on this call, type A folks and all that good stuff. I'm just going to say this definitively. The only people who will remember you working while you're on vacation are a significant other, your loved ones, and your kids. 20 years from now. If you think anyone's going to remember 20 years from now, it will be your significant other, your loved ones, and your kids. Just choose wisely. And so when you're creating this culture, Yaro, for me, I feel like it has to start with the boss understanding this, because they're the ones who ostensibly has the influence to get the team to act in a certain way and hold them accountable from a positional power perspective. But I'll just say this too. Sorry, I can go on forever about this stuff. I'm trying my best to calm down, because this is like kind of exciting thing for me. I just love talking about this stuff. Okay, it's hard to. I'm glad you gave me the permission not to calm down. You know, it's like, the way I see it is like, I wish every leader on earth would ask this question. Because if I could ask their staff this question, let me say it that way. For those of you who are leading other humans, if I had your staff on this call, I would ask them this very simple question. If your direct supervisor did not have their authority over you, would you still choose to follow that person anyway? And I found, when it comes to culture, the people who say yes the most to that question have the best cultures imaginable, because they respect the boss. They're following them not because they choose, not because they have to, because they choose to. And that's a powerful place to be. And I think all cultures need to begin, start, and ideally end with that in mind consistently.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, my dear. Appreciate you.
We are going to Austin, Texas.
Oh, one of my favorite cities.
The good doctor, Anne Maureen. You're up.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Headphones. Oh, so nice to meet you, Shola. I've been anticipating this. This is my first event in
Same.
So I'm not fluent in Yoruba. I'm Nigerian, but my mom.
Oh,
is.
Yoruba. Let's go.
And I know your name. I'm so big into names, and your name, you embody your name. You know, Shola means, like she said, abundance, bringing in hope, signifies wealth, success, all of that. I'm like, oh my goodness, he just embodied that on here. Like, so I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I have 2 questions. I wrote that down. My mind has just been bubbling with so many things you said. I work with kids. So I think I will start with the first question is for my son. So my son is 10. He's a writer. And so I went to ask. So this is what I said. So for someone like him who he just wrote a book, and he's thinking about writing more books back and forth, back and forth. And what struck me with what you said, I haven't gotten your book yet. Like I said, I just joined the Outlier, so I didn't know about it. So I'm going to get it. So you said you wrote a book to your younger. So what advice give to my son to be able to incorporate these values that you were talking about, civility, which segues into my next question. But for this question for him, how can he incorporate these values that you have been talking about now that he's starting on that journey of being an author?
Yeah. So first of all, 10 years old and being an author and even having that on your radar is, talk about a high achiever. So there's that. The best advice that I could give your baby boy is something very simple. And it's like, I think, and I wish I knew this when I was 10, that everyone is dealing with some level of insecurity. It's not just you. So I would think like, oh, she's so confident. She's got it all together. And we're all fumbling in the dark. No one knows. And that includes everyone on this call. We're all trying to figure this out. Like, I got this completely figured out. I don't know, unless you're a sociopath. Like, most people don't think that way. We're just trying to make it through and fumble through the dark. And if I knew that in the beginning, then be more willing to give myself kindness and acceptance, knowing that I'm not alone. That I'm like, all right, all right. The fact that I don't know what my next step is okay, because no one else does either. And I can give myself grace instead of me saying, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I don't know what's going on. And then second thing I would tell your son is to not use those words to describe yourself ever. Whatever comes after I am ends up becoming real. I truly believe this. So I would advise your son and anyone else on this call to speak to yourself in the same way that you'd speak to the person who you love the most. And I make a lot of mistakes. I screw up a lot. I hurt people unintentionally. God knows I don't try to. I have to practice being kind to myself. There's a chapter in my book around forgiveness that I think probably one of the most powerful chapters or anything I've ever written. I really hope you guys read this book because I think you'll really dig it. Understanding like being kind to yourself and being willing to forgive yourself for not having it all together is probably one of the hardest things for people to do. And figuring out at 10 will save you so much pain, and it saves so much pain in his 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. So learning that at 10 could be a huge thing.
Oh, that's awesome. You hit the nail on the head, because he's really, really hard on himself. And then he got some pushback, a little bit of bullying at school for writing the book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, a lot of that has been in his head. He has been tentative, in starting the second book. He's not sure. Will he be accepted? Will he be made fun of? So thank you for that.
Can I say something to you about your little boy? Listen, there's an old saying, at least out here in the hood, man, is that they only hate when you're great. So why in the world? That's the only reason why they're coming at your kid. Is like if your kid wasn't doing anything, they wouldn't be saying anything to him. That means your boy is on the right track. So just FYI.
Thank you. And then my last question. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, my last question is, I life coach kids, so 6 to 13. And like I said, your work on civility, everything that you talked about, even what you talked about in, including kids in the sessions at Congress, I thought that would be great if they continue that. So my question is this. Seeing what I've seen in schools, I was a former educator and also coaching kids now, and I think this is really needed. What would you say to educators, coaches like me? How do we go about making this a daily life value? How can we include this in school curriculum? Because I know we always talk about adults, but what I see starting from as young as age 6, equipping them with this sort of skills goes a long way.
Well, first things first is the consistent modeling and rewarding of the behavior that you want to see. I think there's something scientifically where we talk about reward process and how our brains work. And so when you reward the behavior that you want, and if you want to change things, it's not about punishing the behavior that you don't want as much as around rewarding the behaviors that you do want to see. This is really true with children and with kids. So when we're talking about bringing this curricula into schools, part of it is around when you having rules that anyone can understand. And then when you see someone demonstrating that, someone sitting with someone at school at the lunch table who's sitting alone, stepping in when you see someone being bullied, these things need to be rewarded, recognized, so that people feel good, so they'll be more willing to do it. Not only will the kid who does that, who's getting the reward, want to do it again, but the ones who are observing this kid do it will want to do it as well. So that's the whole idea, is keeping this going in a way that it kind of takes off with a little bit of virality, for lack of a better way of putting it. I can go on forever about this, but I mean, literally, like, I need like another call. Can we do this again? Because like I'm like this. I know. I mean, I'm just getting warmed up, man. This is just, I'm ready to go. Thanks, Dr. Emerine. Appreciate you.
All right. I'm going to ask this is just a yes or no question for you. Let's just say, hypothetically, theoretically, somebody was at a retreat and they decided to just wear an apron one day. Would you consider that civil behavior or not?
I have to ask a qualifying question. Is there anything under the apron or apron over clothes?
So anyway,
we never really found out.
We never found out. I'm here for that. I like originality, so I'm here for it. Yes.
Anyway, you've never seen anything until you've seen Matt Emerzian in an apron,
and he's a big guy, so that
says
he's a big dude. He's a big dude.
You're right.
I appreciate that. Pictures, or it didn't happen?
I have pictures, buddy. There's pictures, and in a bathrobe, for the record. I guess, is that my cue to ask a question, Scott?
Yes. That's how I teed you up.
Okay. Well, the good news is I have a call with Shola this week as well, so I can't wait.
We're locked in.
Shola, so I want to get you fired up here.
Let's do it.
So I love everything you talk about, obviously, with the work I do as well. But one of the challenges that I have found in this idea of being civil is, I believe that there's a baseline to this thing. Like, is there some sort of baseline truth or understanding in right and wrong or reasonability that we all have to be able to agree on in order to build from? So, for example, because it's timely, I have people in my life that I know that believe that what happened on January 6th, last 4 years ago, was actually an organized tour and there was no violence. And so I don't see it that way. But in this, that, take politics out of it. Like, if I watch the footage, I see what I see, regardless of party. I'm registered independent voter. They don't see it that way. They see it as organized and civil. And so for me, I find if we can't see something that is, in my opinion, either black or white, it's either one way or the other. Like, there's no gray area here. How do we then build upon that? Or where do we go from there in terms of trying to build relationship and civility and community and civilization, right? In a way that if we can't even agree on these basic, obvious, in my opinion, truths.
Oh God, what a great question. And it's so bumming that we got to like end on this. Well, hopefully we'll have more time to do this, but I'm going to do my best to nail this in 6 minutes. So a couple of things. I often joke, it's not really a joke, when I talk to people around this, is like, hey, I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. So when when we don't share the same set of facts of like, where I'm like 2 + 2 = 4 and they're like 2 + 2 = Tuesday, right? So how are you going to be able to navigate around that?
Yep.
Well, there's a couple of things. I actually dedicated a chapter of my book to this. So, because I think it's so important. I'm not saying, Matt, that this is where some of your family members are, but I'm just going to use this as a general example to illustrate the point. So when people become radicalized and they've like lost their ability to see reality, objective reality, right? That's easily proven through videos and things of that nature. We have to use a strategy that's very uncomfortable for many people. So I often say that most bad behavior is an unskilled expression of an unmet need. This is a little deep, so stick with me on this, right? Most bad behavior is an unskilled expression of an unmet need. So anyone who, and I'm just no problem sharing this with you. I share the exact same opinion with you about January 6th. So the idea that that's a peaceful tour is wild when police officers died. 100+ were injured, police officers specifically. So, and not to mention others. So the idea that it was peaceful doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If I were to go to the person who thought it was a tour, like, are you freaking kidding me? Here's some video clips. Watch these video clips and tell me afterward. I can promise you, back to the boomerang effect, that will not work. So instead, and this is hard, and this is why very few people do it, but we're outliers, right? We do things that most other people don't do, is what I call radical civility. This is really hard. You sit with someone, and they're like, yeah, so you mentioned that was like a tour. Like, help me understand, like, I just want to understand how did you come to that opinion? Or if you want to go even deeper, a question that I love to ask, and you feel free to ask them next time you see them, is, well, how do you know that? You said it was a, like, how did you come to that? I just want to understand how do you know that? Well, my favorite 8 p.m. anchor on my favorite news station said so. Well, that doesn't work, right? So it's like, how do you know that is such a powerful question, because it allows them to go back and hopefully re-examine their critical thinking or lack thereof. I talk specifically in this book about critical thinking, the ability to examine information with logic, go a little bit deeper than what you see on the surface. And you should ask them, like, hey, how do you know that? Just we're trying to understand, like, you said that. Well, I saw this video and people were walking. Where did you see the video from? Or if you were presented, is there anything that I could share with you that may allow you to see maybe a different side to this? Instead of saying that you're wrong, because then you're shutting it down, right? Like, can I show you something that maybe could possibly show another side to this? Because I see what you're saying, but at the same time, there's more information that I'd like to share with you. Are you interested in seeing it? No. Then you know you're not dealing with someone in good faith, right? But the ones who may have this idea around the world that we live in, because AI sure as heck isn't helping making things easier, right? In terms of misinformation and disinformation. So I give a whole chapter on misinformation and disinformation, how to combat it. And like, I know we're short on time, but Matt, we got some time together, so we can go deeper on that, brother, when we talk. But I want to tell you for sure, just from a basic perspective, ask them how you know that, and then offer, are you open to the idea of seeing information that may run counter to what it is that you believe? Instead of them being like, whoa, 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 just showing it to them without them asking. Never, oh, there he is. An apron and a bathrobe are two very different things, Scott, just BT dubs. But
I wore both.
We have that too. I'm not sure we can show that. It's a family show.
Fair.
All right. We're going to try to sneak in. I don't know if we can get two more questions in.
I'll be much tighter.
Colonel Heathman in St. Louis, you're up.
Going once.
Scott is frozen. The good Colonel is frozen. Tim in the frozen tundra of Canada, you're up.
I am in frozen tundra for sure. Shola, thanks so much for this. This is a great conversation. I don't remember what you called it earlier when you were talking with Scott, but you said you're greatly affected by angry situations that come up. And I feel the same way. And I think about, you talk about toxic workplaces, toxic places. One of the events that led me to the Outlier project just over a year ago was getting let go.
Oh.
And I remember that day feeling better at the end of the day without a job, without income, than I did in the morning with those things. So that's a feeling I'm never going to forget. But what I want to ask you is having that affect me, anger and toxicity and stuff like that. Like, what would I start with dealing with those feelings in those situations so that I like to have a different perspective. That's why my camera does this thing.
Oh, sounds good there.
How would I take a different perspective on those situations so that I can better deal with those when they come up?
You know, there's so much there, Tim. I really like the fact that you've said that how much better you felt without your job and without income than you did going into that. That requires its own level of unpacking that I wish I could go deeper in, but I know time is limited. You know, one of the things that I talk about in my book, in just one place to start, is just the concept of cognitive reframing, the ability to be able to look at something objectively as it happens, and instead of assigning your immediate judgment to it, the first thing that comes, because when you get angry, that's because you're assigning some sort of meaning to whatever is happening to you or to someone you love or something that's happening in the world. So that taking a moment to cognitive reframe and be like, you know, is there another way to look at this? is something you can do in the moment. You know, back to Kimberly's earlier point around being in your body, around the whole breathing aspect of something is a huge way to calm yourself so you can engage in cognitive reframing. But starting there, and last thing on this, and by the way, y'all can reach out to me if we're running out of time. You guys got to cut this off because I'm free. I can keep this thing going. Is the idea of the importance of therapy. I can say for myself, because of someone who has struggled with emotions and I struggle with depression to this day. If I did not have a therapist to be able to navigate these really difficult conversations, I just can't imagine. And a lot of high achievers avoid therapy. Like, I'm too busy for therapy. I'm too busy. That's like going on a road trip and be like, I'm too busy driving to stop to get gas. I'm like, what? Come on. Of course we need to do this. And the idea, if it's the resources that's stopping you from getting therapy, I get it. But if it's the stigma, that's wild. Like, we really need to get to a point where we take care of ourselves. So that's my thing, Tim. I'm a big go to therapy guy. I just don't know how I navigate this world without it. But cognitive reframing and being back in your breath is a powerful ways to kind of keep this thing going.
Very good. Thanks a lot for this today.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Guys, this has been a super fun hour. Get Shola's book, Civil Unity. Leave a review on Amazon.
Please.
And Shola, you know, we've 750 people in 35 countries make up the Outlier Project. What can we do to be a resource to you? What can we do to help support you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, honestly, if you do take an opportunity to get the book and share the practice in the book and download the free workbook that goes with it and apply it, that's how we get to change the world. That's all I could ask for. Get the book, use what's in there, and apply it in your daily lives. We can make the world better for all of us.
Shola, thank you so much. I appreciate you, my man. And we made it through the first ever event on our new platform. So thank you guys for bearing with us.